Welcome to Understanding Comics Week 8, where we deep dive into this amazing comic book by Scott McCloud called Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art. I'll link to week 1 below and all the other weeks so you can catch up if you haven't seen this series before. Chapter 8, A Word About Color. We'll do an interesting experiment in a bit where we'll compare the same comic with the same color printed on different papers. And that'll give us some insight on color. Interesting here, he's talking about the evolution of comics being mostly a black and white evolution up until the modern age, when technology and commerce both created the ability to print in color and some restrictions on how color is printed. And we have two different ways of managing color. So you've heard of the red, blue, and green was discovered as additive primaries. I'm sure it goes back to Newton and the prism and all that, but this is how the old TV monitors used to work. They were just had red, blue, and green colors projected, and as you overlap them in different ways, you get different colors. When they're all overlapped one on top of the other, you get white, right? And that's why you put green and blue, green and red together, you get yellow, and so forth. So green and blue makes cyan. I hope so. And then you have the inverse. So that's like projecting light, but paper doesn't project light, it reflects light. So you can do yellow, red, cyan, magenta, and yellow. All overlaps makes black. Okay. Now in most printers, you have a fourth color, which is black, so you don't have to add all of the three together to save on cost, because black ink is cheaper to produce than the other inks. I'm going out on a bit of a limb here. Printing is not like I haven't ever worked at a printer or anything like that. I'm taking guesses, right? So he's talking about here how the addition of color in print media, when it finally was made available, did boost sales. Something about color that really attracted people. It seemed like an exciting thing to go from a black and white newspaper, for instance, to a color one. But there was a cost, right? So that's where the commerce and technology relationship started to apply its pressure onto media. So there was various cost-cutting measures, and they found like a fairly cheap way of printing color onto newsprint, right? And this is where comic books come in, right? We have flat colors, right? Very few gradients, and mostly simple simple blends of the primary colors, right? He's talking about here how the decision then came to be to pick the basic colors for strength and contrast, so that you'd have like strong, very bright kind of attractive coloring, but perhaps lacking subtlety if you create a lot of kind of middle of the road blends. As you can see, the color is not my strength. My wife is a fine artist, a painter. She's very strong on color. So when I get to the point where I want to add color to Spirit Girl comics, I'm definitely going to be involving her. We are planning to do some experiments where I print my comics on watercolor paper, and she adds watercolor to it. And we want to try these things to see what we could do with color in the future. I'm a little bit out of my depth when it comes to color. I am very much like a black and white oriented person. But let's soldier on. I thought this was super interesting here. You can see that the decisions of comic artists were informed by the restrictions, and what, like, a lot of people kind of feel like the early comic books come across as crude, but it's clear that they had some sort of appeal because sales went up and it resonated with people enough, and kids, and to become some of the biggest, most recognizable fictional characters in the world, right? So here's an example why the costumes of heroes became quite iconic, and in part because of the colors. So we have like the Hulk is red. Here he has red. It should be purple and green, which are complementary colors, right? And then you have the blue, yellow, and gray of Batman, which is the reason why I think that old costume is better from the 70s, 80s, and 90s than just the black. Now, the gray and black is better than just the black, like in the movies. But definitely on paper, I think the better choice is the iconic blue, yellow, and gray, because it is distinctive. It is special to that character, which I find is the point, right? You need to have like these bold, distinctive color patterns that make the character iconic. Superman, another example, red, yellow, and blue. Right? He's discussing the strength of color to emphasize the shape of objects. So he's giving an example of a complex series of lines that can be made legible through color. The same sequence of panels with color, what really comes to life here is the shape of the objects, right? Because the characters are the same color as the background, white, so it does kind of come across as a flat image. But I'll show you some tricks that I've learned that you can mitigate that. So he's talking about how flat color comics were flat color comics became a great assistant to the artists that were masters of shape and form, right? Like Kirby. This is an example of a Kirby reproduction of a panel. A lot of people find that Kirby's artwork is a little crude and toy-like, and it isn't crude. It is toy-like, but it really shines in the when you put flat color to it, right? That's an amazing, that rivals any sort of art you can see in contemporary art museums, as far as I'm concerned. And then there's examples of other, like for instance, these are I'm not as familiar with, right? These artists. So it becomes, when you add color, it becomes a more sensory experience than an abstract conceptual experience, as in black and white. Tintin, also all use of flat colors. There's no gradients. It's just like, okay, this shape has that color, this shape has that color, that shape has that color, so on and so forth. Which is, but just the subtlety of various shades of the same color, right? This bed, just to express the shading, it's all the same color, just this part has a little bit more black. Man, I wish my wife was here to add comments. Maybe I should have done this with my wife, really, because she's just her eye with color. Like I'll look at like we'll go hiking somewhere and we'll be looking at the horizon line or something, and I'll literally ask her, I'll say, tell me what colors you see. And as she names the different colors and she points them out, I suddenly see them, and suddenly I see more colors in what I'm looking at. It's crazy how, like, she can pick out the colors in anything she sees, and there's suddenly the vista is more beautiful. It's wild. So the discussion here is of when the technology improved, there was the ability to do more sophisticated coloring, and then people started using colors to express more of themselves, I guess, is what he's discussing, like mood, depth, Once again, I apologize. Color is not my strength. But he's discussing how, there's advantages and disadvantages, and the black and white and the color are strong for different things, right? One thing that black and white is that it's more accessible because it's cheaper. So for small-time comic makers like me, it's a really good starting point, right? So let's look at the same comic book published in two different formats in two different eras, and see how that affects the color and the intention. Okay, so we've got question number 18 here, 285. Okay, let's look at that. So the cover looks pretty close to the same. There's some subtle differences, but it's quite close because the cover is semi-glossy. Here the paper is glossy. Let's look inside. There we go. Look at this. You can see a pretty clear difference here. The blue and the blue here. Here the blue is a lot lighter, and the blue here is more muted. Skin tone of the mask. All right. Now, this is a comic printed in the 90s, and so it has the benefit of better quality paper. But if I was able to compare something printed now on glossy paper to something printed in the 70s, we'd see an even more pronounced difference. Here we see in Green Arrow's face, the shading comes across a lot darker here than here, right? If you look at scans of the original Superman comics, as opposed to the reproductions on glossy paper, the reproduction looks quite gaudy. But when you look at the scans, it comes across a lot better because the original coloring, the colorists factored in the paper quality. This is a good example here. The red here is quite rich, whereas here it's more pink. Hopefully that comes across on the screen here. So to me, it looks better on the original paper because that's quite a bit of difference here. Here it's the captions are pink. Here there's like more of an orange peach. Again, should have been patient and waited for my wife to do this. What I'll do is with my wife, we'll do a whole video just on color and look at various comic books and discuss why they work in terms of color. We'll do that at a different time. Anyway, interesting to always compare these sorts of things. Yeah. To me, this one looks better, right, than here. It looks richer. The colors like got more. It's darker. It's richer is all I can say for that. Anyway, once again, my vocabulary regarding color is not very sophisticated. Sorry to keep repeating that, but I wish I had better words. Like here, look at this. Like this looks, I don't know, kind of thin, weak. Even the white of the word balloon. The word balloon is kind of creamy colored to me, and you can see how the color will be affected by the paper, right? The paper is not perfectly white. Sure, it has aged, but it was never, like this type of paper was never perfectly white to begin with, right? So someday my comics will be printed on newsprint. Someday. I know Alterna he started up a newsprint printing company. So Peter Samedi. All right, that's it for week 8. Week 9 will be the closing week of this series. We'll see you in that one. For the paid subscribers, there's going to be a paywall below, and below that paywall you will see some previews of the inks for Spirit Girl number 3. You'll see in black and white how you can create some sense of shape and depth. There's going to be a few techniques you'll see, and we can discuss that in the comments if you like. So that's going to be it. Sorry this newsletter is late. It's been kind of crazy with work. I even had to take a break from drawing. Hurt my shoulder. I did one page with so much detail. My hand was hurting. So it's been a little bit of a ride lately, but looks like we're going to be returning to normal this week. So have a good weekend. See you in the next one. God bless. Bye bye.